Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I'm excited to have our guests on again today. This is Shelly Rawlings, your hostess with the mostest. I never know what to say, host or hostess, but I'm going to say host. And the conversation is really getting there. We're talking about a really heavy-duty topic on the show, and this is Unleashed Real Talk, Real Conversation, and this is all about not feeling that you have to be ginger with how you say things and what you say. My guest and I have been having this sidebar conversation for months now about things that have really upset us and still upset us in our community as it relates to health and wellness. And how do we move the bar? How do we move some of these numbers that continue to plague us with health? And we're going to focus in on women of color in particular, but there's some residual effect that we'll get to with men as well, because we share households with men in a lot of cases, and we know men in our families that probably are in some of these categories that we've been talking about. But we've been having this really insightful conversation about women of color and trauma. And so my guests today, Marla Smith and Lolita Jacinto, I want to, it's such a nice last name. I'm like, I want to have like my, my French hat on or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like this whole ambiance around your last name. But for the sake of this, we'll say Marla and Lolita, Miss Lo as her patients call her. But we're talking about trauma, and it's a very hot topic. And I was sharing with you all earlier that I was reading this article about women and trauma, and it's interesting that this category or this term called PSTD came up as it relates to women and trauma, and it was shocking to me because I never correlated that term with what we have experienced and what our sisters and our mothers and our aunties and girlfriends have experienced as it relates to trauma. And Dr. Angela Neal Barnett, who wrote the article, and this is on the National Association of Depression and Anxiety. And so it's a big deal. She wrote this major article, and she was saying that women of color are 2.5 or 3.5 times more likely to experience sexual assault. We're more likely to have racial assault than any of our peer groups. And, assault and trauma can come from mental, it can come from physical, in addition to the things that I already talked about. And we've already had this conversation about it happening or instilled how we deal with it from way back when we were little girls. So Lolita, I want to start with you to share just more on the topic, because this thing is real and it stays with you and we don't talk about it.
Right, because when a person or a woman suffers trauma of any sort, we've named a few, there comes other emotional baggage, depression, anxiety attacks, and so forth. And when you're depressed and you're feeling low, and chronic disease is approaching you, a lot of times you lose atonement and awareness of what's really going on, or you wake up day in and day out on such a low that you're not even aware of these things going on until one day things really break and you find yourself in an emergency room, or you're at the doctor's and your pressure's like 190 over 110, something ridiculously high. So trauma is something that truly needs to be looked at. I mean, I can remember as a little girl seeing my neighborhoods look a certain way. Mom and dads were in the home, the kids, were out playing in the yard and things of that nature. And then one day something happened. Crack cocaine hit my neighborhood and my neighborhood changed. So, when I was going, to the bus stop to, or go wherever I was going, I see little Pookie and 2-year-old little Pookie in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Pookie, and then you'll find Pookie's mama.
Right.
And you wonder, like, Lord have mercy.
What happened?
And that's way back then. Now being a nurse, I work labor and delivery, and you think, that's a happy place. But again, you can get your very sad, traumatic mom who could be homeless and pregnant, who could be holding a pregnancy because of a rape. I mean, issues can go very deep across labor and delivery room suites all over the country.
And we don't even think about that. We think of the nice, happy experience that women have having kids. We don't think about the trauma that some women are experiencing.
And I don't want to even talk about diversity, because some of our sisters, from certain African countries have traumatic experience. It may be cultural for them to have, circumcisions done.
Yes.
And, when you're working in labor and delivery, that's a very intimate, close time with your patient. So sometimes, like, when you see, mutilations like that.
Exactly.
Wow.
Mutilation.
It's like
all of what it is. That's what it is.
It is mutilation.
I mean, real talk.
Right.
Because that causes problems now.
Right.
Or when you have a patient who's been a previous rape victim. Women respond that way when you're in a labor and delivery room suite.
Right.
And so your heart just has this big compassion. I mean, I've just always thought about this, like, oh my Lord, like, this is horrible. So, I think this is really good talk. And for all of the listeners out there, like, there are places to go. There are outreaches to go to talk. Because the way our bodies are made, I mean, our organs and our heart, and I mean, all of that has an emotional response that releases hormones in our body.
Right. Right.
And when you're under chronic stress, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen children grow up over time and end up with some, immunologic diseases as adults.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also seen, these adults talk through things, like we said in our last episode, when you see a therapist and start getting some of this stuff out, healing does truly take place.
And, that's the thing, because Marla, you said before, you made a comment about therapy. Yeah. And I mentioned that this writer, this doctor who did a piece on women of color and trauma, talked about it being unnamed, untreated, unknown, because of this whole stigma of having to keep it in. And how do we move away from that? Because we don't want people to think we're crazy. We don't want people to think, oh, she's seeing a therapist, she got some real stuff going on, because it's the step toward healing, right, Marla?
Yeah. Right. It's exactly that. And you're right in that we don't necessarily want people to know. And hence this conversation being unleashed is taking it off and talking about it. Because one of the things, like, even Lolita, as I'm listening to you, Shelly, as I'm listening to you, that S word, shame, is real. And that
not Superwoman.
No, shame.
Yeah.
Shame about being
Right.
abused, so we don't say anything, right? Shame about I can't really pay my bills, so my lights are off. Shame for, like,
Right.
even Lily, when you were talking about going outside and just feeling the sun, it might feel good in that moment, but then you start thinking about all of the different things that are going on with you or in your life, or the things that you've seen that you really can't say out loud. So that's like a momentary freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still internal. Like, you can't really express it out externally. And I think, like, saying to people there is help, but saying that, like, personally, I have no shame in my game about saying that I see a therapist.
Life is too short.
And I have said it to people, and they're like, you see it? Oh no, I don't need a therapist. Or,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I wish I could do that.
Mm-hmm. You can.
Right.
Right.
But it's a stepwise process. I get it. But it is so necessary and community, we have been lied to so much for so many different things. Keep it in, don't say it, be strong, you can do it, you'll survive. And people bought into it. And now our community is affected severely.
Severely.
So severely.
Severely. Yeah. Layers on layers and generational.
Generational.
Yeah. I'm going to have a guest on, and you know her, Marla, she went to school with us. But to your point, I'm noticing more and more of my friends going into counseling.
Yeah.
Counseling, right? And they're women of color. And I've looked at some of their business pages, websites, etc., and they're specifically zoning in, not that they're only treating women of color, but as a woman of color doing counseling that can help other women of color, I think is monumental. And now what we have to do is figure out how to promote these ladies. I mean, they're doing great work. How do we get it out there so that we start this conversation to say it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
And you don't have to be ashamed. And so like you were saying earlier about being in the room with your contemporaries when you were in college, and once one person starts talking, then another person opens up, or it reminds you, oh yeah, I've been through that. So you might still share a little bit more, but you realize more and more and more that you're not alone. And that is a major part of it, just reaching out. And so this conversation unleashed because there's some frustration, but mostly because there's concern and compassion for our community. So it is a hand that's extended, right? Join the conversation is a hand that's extended to say, hey, find someone, find help. Your girlfriend who you didn't open up to, I guarantee she's got a story as well, right?
That's right.
And then also a lot of times in our communities with women of color, sometimes, we walk that strong walk all the time, that sometimes it's the healing. I'm not going to say don't go to a therapist, because I think that's very good. But sometimes, like when you embrace another sister and experience of love right there,
judgmental, right?
Huge. It's huge. I mean, I've had patients who have had difficult situations, and sometimes as a nurse you just don't know what to say. And I have embraced my patient. I'm like, my patient, everybody in my unit say I'm a hugger. Come on, baby, let's get some love. And starting there really helps, because a lot of people don't experience love.
Right. And
that's what it feels like.
That's an important point,
because with children, you can have a baby with failure to thrive and no one touching and nurturing that child, and that child will not grow.
Absolutely.
It's almost like you've got this thing, this piece of luggage, it's on your back, right? And you're carrying it all through life. You're carrying it, and the load is heavy. It's heavy, but you're still a wife. You're still a mom. You're still an employee. You're still a boss. You're doing all these things, but this load is heavy. And then you don't think about how people are observing you.
Right.
And what you're not giving other people. So to your point about children, just like I watched my family members and I adopted many of their ways, our children will do the same.
The apples don't fall far from
the tree.
No,
absolutely.
Not at all. And I mentor a lot of women, and they really, once you get the conversation going, it spills. So the hugs, the hand holding, the just sitting there and allowing them to cry, laugh, talk, whatever the emotion is, to get it out, it makes such a huge difference. And so there are folks like us who are givers, and then turn around and say, wait, I need somebody to listen to me too. So there has to be a healthy balance in general, right? And then I think that takes us back to what we're eating. Consumption.
That's a big part of it.
I know, it's a whole nother conversation.
That's a big part of it, what we eat, because in our communities a lot, we don't have Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. You know, we have a lot of McDonald's and Burger Kings and, you know, Chinese places. And, you know, when you're eating those chemically infested foods, because that's exactly what they are,
Exactly.
it sets off chemical imbalances in your body,
Right.
you know, because your body initially can't do anything with it.
Right.
And so it now has to take from your organs and all your good stuff to combine with all this chemical stuff to break it down, you know? And then we also digest a lot of, or eat a lot of meat.
Right.
And
not to mention comfort food. So when you've experienced something traumatic, and you are in your own jail, right? Because you feel like you can't share, you can't talk about it, and people are gonna, the S word, as Marla said earlier, what do? Will I eat more? I may drink more. I may overeat. I may drink more.
Things,
right?
Dull those.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that we all know they're just Band-Aids, they're temporary feelings. And once all that goes away, you're worse, right? You feel worse. You're heavier. You may have an alcoholism problem. You know, there's all these other net effects to it.
Right. Yeah.
It's something else. I just hope that as women hear this and hear our hearts on this, you know, I'm not a doctor, but I love people. I study sociology in school. I have a wellness company, you know, so our focus is to help people be well. Marla, you're in rare diseases. You've been in the health field all of your adult career. Lolita, you're an RN, you know, so we're not just saying stuff just to say stuff. You know, we really are looking at this, I want to say, from a holistic standpoint, and I'd love to bring other people in the conversation, but I just hope that people hear our hearts on this so that we can start the conversation, because there's so many stories out there, and there's so many people that are still imprisoned by their experiences, and you start living a lifestyle that becomes normal. That's not normal.
That's not normal.
And then those around you are, you know, assistants in that abnormal lifestyle that you have.
Right.
And now it's just spinning and duplicating and spinning and duplicating. So I just want people to listen to this and maybe have that conversation. You know, you could have trauma, as we mentioned earlier, in the workplace. It could be a military trauma. It could be a childhood trauma. It could be a spousal or relational trauma.
Right.
There's so many categories. And I just keep going back to PSTD because that hit me like a ton of bricks when I saw that.
You don't realize that. You know, but a lot of times in our communities, you know, children are walking to school and seeing someone get shot. That's traumatic.
Absolutely.
You know? That's traumatic. Or, you know,
happened, I don't know if you all saw the news. A 15-year-old boy was stabbed by a 15-year-old girl on the metro yesterday. And they're around their friends leaving, you know, going home. So other people are watching.
Right. And that's traumatic. And I don't care what side of the bridge you're on. If your phone saying, whoa, 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 that's not normal.
Right.
And I think it's really
normal
to call a spade a spade. If it's abuse, it's abuse. We tend to cover up stuff or soften it so that it's not offensive to someone else, the person that you're interacting with. If they're abusive, they're abusive, right? Or
he just pushes me sometimes when he's mad.
Whatever.
What?
Speaking to you any kind of way that's unacceptable, you know when it's unacceptable. And so just allow that to be unacceptable so that you can make a change for yourself. It perpetuate. It will continue and continue.
Right.
And it's a learned behavior too.
It's empowering.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's empowering.
Yeah.
You know.
Lord, I think I do need a glass of wine. Woo, this is a big one. And I feel like we'll probably come back to this topic in some direction because there's other arms to it, obviously, as we keep going. But as I mentioned, I am going to have a counselor on, and she's working on her dissertation right now to complete her Christian counseling. And I want to hear her perspective on some of these topics because she's doing the work, you know, and she's seeing a lot as well on that side with people who are taking steps to get out of this predicament and this lifestyle that they're living. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It gave me even more insight, and I think it's fueled me to really continue these conversations.
Right.
We have to become unleashed. I just feel like we have got to become unleashed. Like take it off and just say it.
Because we have great things to do in the world.
That's it.
We have great things to do, and we have to do those things from an empowering mind. And before we go, you know, lately I've been, you know, on this manifesting kick because I'm no different from anybody else out there. I've had my traumas and my experiences as well. And the one thing that I have learned and I have put to test that, you know, in the lull of the moment, when you're really feeling low, we all have control of our thoughts. And if we just could focus our mind on what our goals are, and I'm giving testimony now because it's not a trauma that I've experienced, but I've had a huge financial issue. I didn't make some financial decisions correct when I was sending my children to school, and it wallowed me in my lap. And it was a heavy, heavy burden. And as I began to look that fear in the face, my finances, and began to get out in nature and clear my mind, you know, and meditate and say my affirmations that I am debt free, you know, call it what I wanted it to be, it did manifest. And I have a plan. And I feel 100% lighter. So when we struggle to work toward those interventions, you know, ladies, stay with it because healing's coming and you're soon going to feel it.
And thank you for that, because this whole thing called mindfulness, and I've done a lot of work there, have a few certifications under my belt with the modalities around mindfulness. I want to talk to that because on the next segment, maybe we can hit that a little bit. I don't know how many women of color do meditation. And you know, how do we open it up to give people some basic things to do to recenter and to breathe and to just calm themselves and be in the moment. So thank you for that, Lolita. But we got to run. We're going to wrap tonight and hopefully get this up and out because I'm anxious for people to hear it. But thank you all so much. Thank you, Marla. Thank you, Lolita. And let's keep the conversation going.
You're rolling.
All right, ladies. Have a great day.
Peace and blessings.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.